In the long-gone world of the 80s and 90s, the one way to make sure your show was a success was to get out on the street and promote the town before you arrive. This is an invaluable skill in those days, and few men were better at it than Terry Joyal, more widely known as Terry Garvin. He was renowned for being a former wrestler with his kayfabe brother Ron Garvin and had turned booker for Kansas City. After a successful stint there, he would be offered a spot by Pat Patterson to come work for the World Wrestling Federation. Along with Mel Phillips, the three of them would go on to be the central figures in one of wrestling's darkest situations that still is having far-reaching consequences to this day. Garvin would begin life in Quebec. As a childhood friend of Pat Patterson, he would learn to wrestle at a local church. As stated before, this friendship with Patterson would pay off down the line when he would be offered the spot of being in charge of the ring crew and helping promote the towns. Though this position doesn't sound like much, it is a job where the person in it would have the chance to make the company a lot of money, and with that would come just enough power to get people to turn a blind eye. With this blind eye came a kind of joking that would even bleed on air time to time about Terry Garvin, specifically from Gorilla Monsoon and Lord Alfred Hayes.
Gorilla Monsoon, oh. Gorilla Monsoon, I think he was a good commentator. I think he said stupid things sometimes.
Bring out something from down deep, or should I say from up on high?
Up on high. Well, Steve Lombardi, a graduate, I understand he graduated with honors from the Terry Garvin School of Self-Defense.
Yes, and I think that Garvin probably looks upon this man with a lot of satisfaction because he's shown great promise. And he's always striving for a good position in wrestling, gets behind his opponent, and then really takes over from there.
I understand that Pat Patterson also spent a number of hours with this youngster.
Yes.
Patterson, former Intercontinental champion. There might have been still some, well, outstanding moves that Pat was noted for.
Well, I think he's influenced this young man's career a lot, Pat Patterson, the way.
Monsoon's joking has been noticed in recent years, and according to Jake Roberts, Monsoon knew of much more than rumors or innuendo.
Yeah, I was there.
Yes, you remember all this?
It was all true.
All true.
Oh yeah. No, I never witnessed it. I just knew it was going on. It made me sick.
Yeah. So
Pat Patterson, Terry Garvin, Mel Phillips out of Philadelphia. Yeah. Story goes that Gorilla Monsoon called Mel Phillips putting the figure 4 on some kid that's sucking his toes.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
What Monsoon or others knew for certain is up for debate, but it cannot be denied that those in the company certainly had heard of what Garvin, Phillips, and Patterson were up to.
I think a lot of us were just worried about the whole state of the business at that time. It did come right after the Hogan steroid thing, and all that was a kind of a black eye, I think, and then this was a totally different thing, and I think it was one of those things that was incited from talk. You know, like it came from the initial. I mean, there was wrongdoing with Terry Garvin and Mel Phillips and maybe some of these other guys. I don't know what happened. It's like it came down to it was like, what do you know? It's like, well, I don't know anything. What goes on behind some door? I got no idea what they're doing in there. You know, or you know if they're fraternizing with them in the bar and stuff. I don't know what they're doing.
So you hadn't seen anything that would be categorized as misconduct?
And nobody did. I don't think. You know, very few guys. I think that's why well, I'm sure there was a settlement in that case, but in a lot of cases, like where the FBI was trying to, put their claws into Vince and really, send him to jail for a long time. And I remember there was a big concern about it. But in the end, it was just a lot of talk, because wrestlers were saying that Vince was selling steroids, when Vince clearly never ever sold steroids and was never doing anything like that, never needed to, never happened. But the wrestlers had conjured up a lot of this talk, and all this talk was out there. So there was a lot of stuff that was being verified by wrestlers with no real evidence.
Just because they'd heard it.
Yeah, and then same with the ring crew. I think Honky Tonk, as an example, was talking about a lot of the abuse that was going on to these young ring boys. And you know, I don't know what Honky Tonk saw, and I don't doubt that there was some shenanigans going on there that should have been, you know, some kind of oversight anyway. But you know, as for what I ever saw, and for any wrestlers that I know that I've ever talked with, there was nobody saw anything, because nobody went to those rooms with those guys, and nobody did anything. It was like they were on their own.
Even with many wrestlers skeptical of what was going on with Garvin, the rumors would persist, and Garvin's involvement would remain a staple of these stories. His value to the higher-ups would be his saving grace, as he was very good at his job and made money for his employers no matter the territory he worked for.
We heard about it, but it's like, we called it territories back in those days. It was like the New York territory. And they have these guys making these accusations that they were accosted or threatened, or they wanted, you know, to be, some gay guys wanted to have relations with them. And, you know, you hear that and you go, it's not here. I mean, and it was one of their things they have to deal with. I didn't really give a lot of thought to it. I didn't think anything would come of it anyway.
Did you ever meet Terry Garvin? Because he pretty much retired full-time by the time you got in business.
Pretty much. See, Terry he was just flat out gay. You just look at him. But see, even being gay in the wrestling business back then, it didn't disqualify anybody, because the business remains the same whether you're gay or whether you're not. It's to sell tickets, or to sell. Well, back in those days, it was just to sell tickets. The days before pay-per-view, and you still had the big shows to do, but that's the only way you could make money. So, and we treated, somebody said, how was gay guys treated? I said, you know, like everybody else, like shit. No, not really. But if a guy could draw money, you know, he was accepted. So, and I think probably Ronnie could say, not Ronnie, Terry could say that if he walked into a wrestling dressing room back then, you know, it was like, you know, he felt at home. And I'd have to agree with him.
Brian Blair tells a particularly awful story of a time that Andre the Giant and Terry Garvin took advantage of Koko Ware.
And the Giant in the back, Koko was in the front seat, and I'm driving. Terry's bisexual. All of a sudden the boss says, Koko. He says, yeah, boss. He said, come here, I want to tell you something. So Koko bends over like this. Yeah, boss. Andre snatches him in a front face lock. Koko is saying, loosen up, loosen up. Well, he turns his ass backwards, and there's Terry Garvin with his pants down. Terry's cutting a promo on Koko saying, oh man, I love that dark meat, and boy, I'm just gonna get some tonight. And the boss is going, he's just laughing. So I hear his pants go, and Koko's screaming now for bloody murder. And I hit the brakes and I to pull over, and I hear Koko go, and I don't know what happened. No idea what happened. And all of a sudden, I get the car over, and Koko jumps out of the car, and he starts running.
All of the rumors would come to a head when the Ring Boy scandal broke. To this day, many of the old-timers will say that it was all blown out of proportion. Others, depending on who they get along with, will determine the level of honesty they will have on the topic.
What happened there was Terry Garvin and the ring crew reported to Pat Patterson and there was an incident that hit the papers in New York, and it was a big scandal that involved Terry, and Vince had no choice other than he had to have Pat fire Terry Garvin, and then Vince had to somehow show that Pat was ultimately responsible because he let it happen, and that what's his name reported to Pat. So that's why Pat was suspended, and during that period of time, Pat did not come around. I don't know what kind of communication there was between Pat and Vince. I would not have been surprised if Vince continued to. It didn't have a contract, but I would not have been surprised if Pat didn't receive some compensation with Vince through that period of time. And it was like a 6-month period where, and Indianapolis was the next big pay-per-view, and where Pat and I would do it together. It was like, okay, this is all your baby. You figure it out, book the card, and you're going to have to run everything. And which I fortunately was able to do.
Now, as far as that controversy with Terry Garvin and the Ring Crew and basically horrible sex scandal that hit the WWF at that point, were you shocked? I know you mentioned a few times, Gina, nothing really surprised you. Shocked?
Yeah.
Is that one of those things? It's kind of one of those things that shocks us. Man, that's not something I thought of with Terry Garvin.
Terry was a friend, had been a friend for a long time. And in this business, there are all kinds of people. They're gays, they're straights, they're, I mean, like I say, nothing surprised me. And I look at someone what they contribute to the success of the promotion. And Terry, there was nobody better than getting towns and going out and knowing how to promote them and have the towns be successful. Terry Garvin was, in my opinion, the best guy that I ever worked with for doing that. And he was close with Pat, and it just was one of those really, really sad things. And what was bad was because it involved underage guys that were handling the Ring Crew, and it hit the papers in New York. And you couldn't ignore it or sweep it under because especially the guy in New York that really hated Vince would have made you suffer terribly if you didn't do something about it. And it was sad. It was unfortunate. But
as he said, the part the higher ups in the industry were worried about was that if you don't do something about it, they would write mean things about you in the papers, and that would just be such a tragedy to endure for them that they were forced to take action. Things would come to a boiling point for the Terry Garvin accusations when Randy Orton's Uncle Barry would call into Larry King Live during Vince McMahon's appearance on the show.
You said you were once molested, right? Many years ago?
Yeah, that was many years ago.
I'll get some unequivocal statements here, and then we'll go to calls. Are you saying, Vince, unequivocally, have no knowledge of this, that if you did have knowledge of it, any employee who came on with anybody would be fired? Fired on the spot. We're family entertainment. It's a bunch of bunk.
Barry would get the chance to be face-to-face with Vince McMahon to discuss Terry Garvin during a very contentious episode of Donahue where the Ring Boy scandal was covered.
Because I wouldn't have sex with another guy in the game, I couldn't get promoted, including 3. Honestly, some. Well, listen, while you're laughing, this has been a not so funny issue for women. Now we have a casting couch, essentially alleged, in the wrestling game, and some guys are saying I lost my job because I wouldn't do this to this guy who was a higher, more powerful than me on the ladder. And before you think this is trivial, first of all, let's understand that a couple of these charges involve kids, 14 years old, juveniles. You go to jail for a long time if you're involved with sex of any kind with a juvenile. One more point. The Wrestling Federation, you know how you tee-hee, ha-ha, what a joke, hoo-hoo, $1.7 billion in 1990. That's more revenue that has been generated by the NFL. So while you're laughing, somebody is whistling all the way to the bank. We have 3 people who used to be in the wrestling game who are going to tell you that they indeed encountered people who wanted sexual favors, and they were professionally penalized when they said no. And if you think the WWF is hiding behind lawyers, here is the head of that organization, who has accepted, incidentally, recently, resignations from 2 executives who stand accused of gay sexual harassment. He'll have Barry Orton. Here's Barry O, the former professional wrestler who you think you lost your job with the WWF after refusing similarly.
Actually, no, I've never actually said that. Okay, that's something that the media has come out, and with the stories that I've given, they have kind of turned it around where I've said that. I've never said that. However, I had encounters with 2 of the gentlemen that have resigned since the allegations began. And these incidents, of course, happened in 1978, which is a long time ago. However, the impact and the gravity of the situations are very severe. And, you know, if they were behaving that way then, and, you know, they would be behaving that way now, I would expect.
No laugh here. You accused an executive grabbing your crotch, legs, and chest and wouldn't stop.
Yeah, well, I was in between the 2 of them in the back seat of the car on the trip.
We're in the center.
Right.
You thought it to be a place where a junior guy has to sit.
Pretty much.
This was the early 80s?
This was 1978.
78. Right. So this is before the billion-dollar Wrestling Mania pay TV Hulk Hogan.
Oh yes.
Era. And you had to drive. You know, you guys weren't walking in money then.
And everyone, you know, the more people in the car, the better, because everyone would split the expenses and keep their car.
Don't you saying that you got out of the car and said, not me? And,
oh yeah, you know, it went on for several minutes. I finally demanded that the car be back. At first, I thought it was kind of funny that they were joking, but then it became, you know, harassment.
Right. Barry, it would be hard for a jury to feel a whole lot of sympathy for a guy of your size. You know what I mean? A helpless woman you're not. How old were you when this transpired?
19 years old. Probably about 35 pounds lighter.
And also probably not altogether together in your head, like a lot of 19-year-olds. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely not. You know, and I was trying to be accepted into the business. I was young, I was green.
And you got the big dream ahead of you. Maybe you're going to be the big guy. And there was money if you got on the main card.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're following your dream, and I suppose you want us to know, among other things, that when a couple of guys in the game, executive types, come on to you like that, and you're 19 years old, you may be a little hesitant to tee them off.
Of course. You know, and so I endured it for as long as I could until it became, I started feeling suffocated and I couldn't take it anymore.
What brings you forward now, John?
Actually, I came forward because when Vince said Barry's charges are ridiculous, it was just, I knew something that went on in the business, and anybody in this business really knew about it, knew what was going on with Patterson.
So this is like this is a feature of this culture that has been underway for a long time, and because it often involves near jobless, vulnerable young males who wanted to be either in the game or on the card, they'd back up and nobody wanted to blow any whistles. And I think, if I may, this also should be said, you didn't get a lot of press scrutiny. Nobody took you seriously anyway. Mainstream sports press today doesn't. Sir, you wanted to say?
We've never looked the other way in anything. I'm very happy to confront everyone today, whatever allegation they have. The 3 individuals about whom most of these allegations are hurled are no longer with the WWF. We have started an independent investigation on our own to get to the bottom of all of this, and that's why we're here today, is to get to the bottom of it. We may even learn something here today that my investigators do not know. I want to get to the bottom of it just like you gentlemen do.
What would you like to say to him, anybody?
I'd like to say that it's about time, because up until now, you've been animately denying that not only is this taking place, but that you're saying that you knew nothing of it. I just find that really difficult to believe.
Well, there's no reason. How do you find it difficult to believe that I knew nothing of it? Why would I condone this kind of activity and risk this alleged kind of revenue?
Because Vince, because you are the king of an empire. You have eyes and ears everywhere. And it's so common, at least the topic of conversation for 3 to 5 minutes every night in the dressing room, because a lot of the guys, they have to put up with it and they hate it because if they say anything, they're out of a job.
I don't believe that to be the case, but there may be some of it. That's the case, then let's get to the bottom of it. I'm anxious to learn, just as you are.
Well,
I want a wholesome organization. I want an organization that everyone can be proud of.
These pros in the wrestling game will tell you a lot of the folks screaming the loudest in the audience are young people, males and females. Dave, you're editor of the Wrestling Observer. Do you see Mr. McMahon coming forward here to open the door, at least, to the possibility here? Are you impressed with what he has said here in the first part of our program?
It surprises me, and I'm glad he said it, because...
You're glad he said what?
I'm glad he admitted that there was a possibility, because none of us know for sure. Maybe Barry does, okay? And Murray and Tom, okay? I don't know for sure. It's one person's word against another, and maybe if the executives told Vince that this didn't happen, maybe they were telling the truth, and maybe they're not. I can't tell you for sure, although I will say this, I do believe Barry's story. He took a polygraph, and I've spent a lot of time discussing it with him, and I think that I'm pretty decent at talking to wrestlers and separating fact from the fiction, and I believe Barry's story.
Barry, please, sir, say that what the big story really was not really the story where I sat between Pat Patterson and Terry Garvin, but shortly thereafter there was another instance, and I remember I'm 19 years old, and I drove from Amarillo to Albuquerque, New Mexico with a single passenger being Terry Garvin, who about 40 miles outside of town started proposing that he perform oral sex on me while I was driving, begging me to let him do so. And of course, because I was young, I didn't want to lose a position or a shot. And I don't have homophobia. I have no problem with, I'm a First Amendment person. I believe everyone has a right to do whatever they want to do. And I told him as nicely as I could, please don't be offended, but that's not, what I'm into, and nothing personal, and, I'm still your friend, but no thanks. And he did this, every 40 or 50 miles he would start again, and it got harder and harder to talk about it.
That's horrible, but that happened.
Well,
what is your point? And your point, Barry,
my point is that Dave Meltzer just said, I have taken a polygraph about all this stuff and came back totally clean. My point is that if he was attracted to young men and younger, because I even heard the stories of the kids underage back then.
His behavior towards you makes you wonder about how he may behave toward others. Is this the point?
Yeah, even
and
now.
You also want to know what? I mean, you don't want to get the posse and the rope and the tree limb for Vince on this, do you?
No, I don't. I don't want to get the posse and the rope for Vince. However, this has been going on in the dressing room in the WWF and I'm talking, under Title VII of the code, the law, it says that any unwelcome sexual advances, touching, or anything else is sexual harassment.
Right.
Now, we have these guys who are bookers and top executives, and believe me, I'm out of here before they are. I know I can't go and complain. I'm sorry. Now, you can say whatever you want to say, and you know that to be true.
They have the power. No matter what you say, you're going to be dismissed.
I'm gone because they are more important than I am.
Yeah.
The audience was indicative of the masses at the time. People just didn't care that these men were being preyed upon. Barry would continue making rounds and find himself on more and more outlets discussing the allegations against Terry Garvin and Pat Patterson.
Orton, in the multicolored tights, wrestled in the WWF under the name Barry O.
Good move there by Barry O.
He says some male promoters in the WWF prey on young, good-looking wrestlers.
I see it go on all the time, coming out of the shower, and there's your booker standing staring at your midsection with that goofy look on his face, making rounds and licking his
Billy Jack Orton says he's seen wrestlers climb to the top by giving in to sexual advances.
These promoters, too, they prey on the dreams of young men. That dream of becoming a top star and making good money. And, You know, it's a dream that I had for many years, and they prey on that to manipulate you and blackmail you mentally and emotionally into destroying yourself.
This is the second public crisis for the WWF in less than a year. Last July, owner Vince McMahon announced a drug screening program in an effort to put down widespread reports of steroid use. At World Wrestling Federation headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut this morning, McMahon acknowledged that 2 wrestling executives have resigned amid the charges, but he says none of those charges are in fact true.
We have been undergoing an investigation. Our investigation shows us that, again, if anything, very well have been some locker room horseplay. There was never anything, to our knowledge, approached anything illegal or immoral. We don't tolerate that here in the World Wrestling Federation.
McMahon says if Orton was sexually harassed, he should have gone to the police. And McMahon added Orton was never a big star in wrestling, so the whole story is just a case of sour grapes.
Barry's story never changed, and he held to it until he passed away. However, in recent years, a new accuser has come to light. Nick Kiniski was a journeyman who had been around many different territories and was the person Toshiaki Kawada and Koto Fuyuki had their American debut against. His height of mainstream is probably a series of losses to Macho Man Randy Savage on WWF television.
Getting harassed by Terry Garvin, sexually. He'd say, hey, come on, let me do this, and you'll have it made for the rest of your life. And Terry, I'm not that way. Well, you can read a Playboy. I go, no, sorry. Even had to throw him out of my room one night. I remember I was in LA picking up my bags and said goodbye to all the boys. I can't believe you're leaving, but you know what? Hey, they can beat you, but they can't eat you. I said, you guys are pathetic. At least I can hold my fucking head up high and walk out of here with my pride. And went back to the hotel, called my dad, say, hey, I'm flying in. He says, good for you, and that's, I don't regret that. You know what I mean? You're not going to take my self-respect from me.
Did you ever mention that to Vince or anybody up? Like, hey, it's Terry Garvin's, this guy's basically harassing me here. Oh,
yeah,
you did?
I was in Portland, Oregon, and I called Vince right to the office and told him, and that's when it went downhill. You can't tell me Vince didn't know and all those guys know. It was common, right? It was common.
Meaning Terry Garvin or other guys?
All the guys, there's been scuttlebutt for years. You know about that. I can just personally say what happened to me, right?
Yep.
You know what I mean? Hey, I got nothing against that lifestyle. I'm just not that way, like, I don't have a problem with it. It's just, it's not my cup of tea, but it's, so, it was a big problem with Terry Garvin.
Especially when they're saying, oh, I'll give you a push or you'll get de-pushed or whatever because of it. Obviously, it's a gigantic problem.
My biggest regret is, of hindsight, when Terry Garvin came in my bedroom, I wish I would have beat the fuck out of him. That would have been I wish I would have just kicked the shit out of him. And, hey, good publicity, got out there, been done and moved on. Now I would have been, because how many people's lives did he mess with? I've been in there with, young kids calling, doing jobs. Well, Terry, you promised me if I did this, you would do this for me on the phone, right? And this is going back 30, 40 years ago, but I still remember it vivid,
Yep.
And, even my business, the bar business, was coming from the wrestling business was out of hand. What's the HR, human resources? I wouldn't even know what that was, back then.
Right.
I didn't know, So, but that's how business was done back then,
Vince could have done that even if he had allowed it. Terry Garvin's not the boss. Vince is. So what if he had gone? What if he had, say, he laid there, he was looking at Playboy, it was getting done, and then Vince calls him the next day and finishes him up. He says, well, we don't need you anymore. So, I don't know. That's his story. I don't really buy that. It could have happened. More likely, who gives a crap anyway? So, I don't know.
Well, do you know what it is? Is that with the Terry Garvin thing, I mean, I believe that Terry Garvin, because quite a few people have come out and said this. I think even Barry Orton said this once when he was a young man, before WWF. The bit that's sort of difficult to quantify one way or another is if he didn't go through with it, that Terry Garvin, well, one of two things. Terry Garvin would have either halted a push he was getting, or he could have made his career. So it's like, is it an idle threat? Is it an idle promise?
No, it's an idle threat. That's what it is. Listen, the guy's name was what, Nick?
Kiniski.
I don't think you're going to draw sellouts with that kid, period. He may have been an all right looking kid. He may have been okay to Mr. Garvin, but I don't think you could draw flies with the guy. I really don't. So if he'd have complained, Vince is running a multi-million-dollar business. He don't have time to listen to this kid who's in first matches, second matches. He means zilch to the overall product. And probably he made the right deal. Whether the guy had said, I'm not putting anybody over, I'm not doing any job, he don't care. He was done with him anyway. And in Nick's defense, I mean, not Nick's, in Vince's defense in this, I don't blame him. Just get rid of it, because there's 1,000 guys you could put in the first match. He could probably walk out in the crowd and find some independent wrestler to put in there. Maybe did a better job. So, well, I think Kiniski, is that his name, Kiniski? Yeah, I just think he just needed something to say, so he said that.
Though some still hold unfortunate views on the topic, it is to be expected. In an industry where many were openly joking about Garvin on air, those same people became very hush when the world was let into what those on-air jokes were about. Just a few days ago, a new Ring Boy lawsuit was announced, so more revelations could be right around the corner. Terry Garvin's open secret was the most dangerous kind, because with an open secret, everyone is just waiting for someone else to speak up about it, or in what is the unfortunate reality, to stay shut up about it. Garvin has long since passed away and will never face any consequence for his actions in this world, regardless of the outcome of the new investigations. Terry Garvin's predatory actions were glossed over for most of his life, but now they are out in the open, and they aren't a secret anymore.